Frozen earth crunches under Silas Granger's boots. He smiles, contract clutched in his gloved hand, as the cabin door creaks open. "Elijah McGraw," Granger calls, his voice smooth as ice. "I believe you've got something that belongs to me." Inside, 10-year-old Anna's blood runs cold. He's back. Elijah McGraw stepped out of his weather-beaten cabin, an axe in one hand, and the cold biting through his duster coat. His face was worn, lined by years of war and solitude, his shoulders bent beneath burdens no one else could see. Elijah had lived here alone for 7 years, miles from the nearest settlement. Once he had been a soldier and then a husband and father, but fire had taken his wife Margaret and their baby girl. Since that night, his heart had been a hollow place, quiet and bitter, like the ashes he sometimes still found buried in the soil where their home had stood. On that morning, when Elijah stepped out to fetch wood for the stove, he saw a shape in the snow by his porch steps. At first he thought it a stray animal, collapsed and left for dead. Then he saw it was a child. A girl, thin as a rail, lay curled against the wind. Her cheeks were hollow, her hair tangled and dark with dirt. The rags she wore were hardly more than threads, stiff with frost. She looked no older than 10. Elijah's breath caught when he saw the glint at her throat. A silver locket swung from a frayed cord, catching the weak morning light. His knees nearly gave way. That locket was his gift to Margaret on their wedding day. It should have burned with her. He dropped to his knees, hands trembling as he brushed snow from the child's face. She was burning with fever, her breath shallow, her pulse faint as a whisper. "Lord above," he muttered, though he had not prayed in years. His fingers touched the locket. The engraving was still there, the rose Margaret had loved. The girl stirred, her lips parted, and she spoke in a voice thin as a reed. "Mama said you'd come." Elijah froze. The words rang through him like a church bell on a still morning. 4 words, no more, and they shook him worse than any battlefield. Elijah gathered the girl into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, her bones sharp beneath the skin, as if hunger had carved her down to the frame. He rose slowly, feeling the tremor in his own body as much as hers. Inside the cabin, the air was close with the smell of wood smoke and iron. He laid her gently on his bed, the quilts rough but warm, then stoked the fire until the flames leapt higher. A pot of water was set to heat on the stove. The girl's eyes fluttered open for a moment. They were the color of autumn leaves, Margaret's eyes. Elijah had seen them once before in this world, and never thought he would again. He dipped a cloth into the warm water and pressed it against her forehead. Her skin burned under his hand. With slow, steady care, he wiped the dirt from her face. Beneath the grime, her features sharpened into something that struck him to the core. The locket rested against her chest. He lifted it, thumb brushing the worn silver, his breath catching as memory came back sharp and merciless. He had fastened that chain himself on Margaret's neck on the morning she became his wife. The girl stirred again. Her lips cracked as she whispered, "Mama said it would keep me safe." Elijah sat heavily on the chair beside the bed, the weight of the words pressing into him. For years he had lived without faith, without family, carrying his ghost like a burden strapped to his shoulders. Now this child had spoken 4 words that tore open every wound he thought had healed. He leaned closer, his voice rough with a steadiness he barely held. "What's your name, child?" Her eyes flickered, her breath rattled, but she formed the word with effort. "Anna." The sound of it lingered in the cabin like a vow. Through the long night, Elijah kept his vigil. He spooned broth past Anna's lips, drop by drop, and waited for her to swallow. Sometimes she did. Sometimes her head lolled to the side, and he thought she might slip away before the dawn. He spoke to her in a low, steady voice, as he once had to skittish horses on the battlefield. "Easy now. Stay with me, little one. You're safe here. Don't you quit." The storm pressed against the cabin walls, the wind howling like a wounded beast. Inside, the fire crackled, throwing shadows across the rough-hewn boards. Elijah's eyes never left her. He was afraid if he blinked, she would vanish, as Margaret had vanished into the flames. Toward morning, her fever broke. Sweat glistened on her brow, and her breathing steadied. Her eyelids trembled, then lifted. Elijah leaned forward, bracing himself. Anna's gaze found him, weak but certain. She reached for the locket with a trembling hand. "Mama gave it to me," she whispered. Her voice was faint, but she added, "She said you had kind hands." Elijah swallowed hard, his throat dry. "Where did you get it, Anna? Where was your mama?" Her voice wavered, each word an effort. "She said it was from someone who loved her. Someone who would love me too." The world seemed to tilt around Elijah. He gripped the chair until his knuckles whitened, fighting to hold steady. Anna's eyes closed again, exhaustion pulling her under. But her words stayed with him, etched into the silence of the cabin, sharper than the cold outside. By the second day, color returned faintly to Anna's cheeks. She sat propped against the headboard, wrapped in one of Elijah's old wool blankets. The cabin smelled of broth and smoke, of life edging back where death had almost claimed her. Elijah placed a tin plate in her lap. On it were eggs and a biscuit. Simple fare, but to her it seemed a feast. She ate with desperate hunger, tearing the bread in small bites, chewing fast, as though afraid the food might be taken away. Elijah watched in silence, his scarred hands clenched and unclenched on his knees. At last he asked, "How long since you ate like this?" Anna stopped, biscuit half raised. She frowned, counting on her fingers with childlike care. "Maybe 8 days, maybe more." The words struck him like a hammer. He forced down his anger and asked, "Who was meant to look after you?" Her eyes dropped to the plate. "A man. Said I cost too much. When the money was gone, so was he." The fire popped in the silence that followed. Elijah's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. He rose and poured her another cup of broth. Later, as dusk fell, Anna hummed softly while she worked on her biscuit. It was tuneless at first, then grew steady. Elijah froze where he stood. It was Margaret's song, the same gentle hymn she used to hum while mending clothes or stirring stew. Anna's voice followed, hesitant. "Did my mama sing it for you too?" Elijah turned his face to the fire, unable to answer, but his silence told her enough. After a long pause, Anna whispered, "Would you want me to stay here?" Elijah's mouth opened, then closed. For 7 years he had sworn he'd never take in another soul, never open his heart again. The words, "you can't stay," pressed at the back of his throat. Yet when he saw the hope trembling in her eyes, he couldn't speak them. Instead, his hand, rough and trembling, found hers. "You belong here," he said. For the first time, Anna smiled. 2 days later, Elijah stood at the cabin window, sharpening his knife by habit more than need. Beyond the frost-glazed glass, the prairie stretched white and wide beneath a sky of iron gray. Then he saw it, a thin line of dust rising on the horizon, smeared by the wind. Riders. His hand stilled on the knife. He watched until the figures resolved. 5 men on horseback, moving with the slow confidence of hunters who knew their prey had nowhere to run. By the time the horses drew near, Anna had noticed the change in his face. She rose from her chair, blankets still around her shoulders. "Who is it?" He placed a steadying hand on her arm. "Get back inside, Anna. Stay out of sight." The riders reined in 20 yards from the porch. At their head sat a tall man on a black stallion. His hair, silver at the temples, caught the dull light. His coat was long, his boots polished, his posture straight as if the world bent to his will. "Elijah McGraw," the man called, his voice smooth and practiced. "I believe you've got something that belongs to me." Elijah stepped onto the porch, rifle loose but ready in his hands. "Don't reckon I've taken anything that wasn't mine." The man's smile was thin as a knife blade. "My name is Silas Granger. The girl, Anna, is my legal ward. Her mother promised her into my care. I hold the contract, signed and sealed." Granger reached into his coat and drew out a folded paper, raising it high. His voice sharpened. "Your Margaret signed this herself. Came to me begging for shelter when no one else would take her in. I fed her, clothed her, kept her breathing, and in return she gave me the child. Her signature, her promise." His smile deepened. "I kept her alive, McGraw, long enough to deliver the girl. That was the bargain." Elijah's jaw clenched. His voice stayed even. "She's no man's property." From inside the cabin, Anna's small face appeared at the window. When she saw Granger, the color drained from her cheeks. She whispered one word Elijah could just hear through the glass. No. The silence stretched, broken only by the restless stamping of horses. Granger's men spread out, forming a half circle across the yard. Their eyes were hard, their hands never far from their guns. Elijah stood firm on the porch. The rifle rested easy in his grip, though every muscle in his body was coiled tight. "Turn your horses around," he said. "You'll find no welcome here." Granger's smile thinned, his silver hair stirring in the wind. "Don't be rash, McGraw. You can't stand against 5 men. The girl's fate is already sealed. Her mother gave me her word, and by law that makes her mine." Elijah's voice was low but steady. "The only word I honor is the one Margaret gave me on our wedding day. That child carries her blood. That makes her mine." For a moment the air was still as death. Then Granger's expression hardened. He raised his hand. Gunfire split the morning. Bullets punched splinters from the porch beams, whined against the cabin walls. Elijah fired back once, twice, his shots deliberate. One man's hat flew from his head. Another's horse reared, nearly throwing its rider. "Inside, Anna," Elijah barked. She darted back from the window as glass shattered around her. Elijah dropped low, ducking through the doorway as lead tore through the wood at his back. He slammed the door shut, shoved the iron bar into place, and crouched by the window. The girl clung to the bedpost, wide-eyed. "They'll kill us," she whispered. Elijah's jaw was set, his eyes never leaving the shapes shifting beyond the broken glass. He chambered another round with calm, practiced hands. "Not today," he said. Outside, Granger's voice carried cold and clear. "You can't hold out forever, McGraw. Hand the girl over, and I'll let you live." The fire popped in the stove. Elijah steadied his rifle on the windowsill. "Come and take her," he muttered. The siege had begun. Gunfire rattled against the cabin walls. Wood splintered, glass cracked, smoke filled the air with the sting of powder. Elijah moved from window to window, firing measured shots, never wasting a round. Outside, Granger's men were patient. They circled wide, pressing him tighter with every volley. Elijah's focus was fixed on the yard when the floorboards creaked behind him. He spun too late. From the shadows of the back door stepped Jesse Pike, younger than the others, sharp-eyed, with a knife glinting in his hand. In an instant, his arm locked around Anna's shoulders. The blade pressed to her throat. "Drop it," Pike said, his voice steady as stone. Elijah froze. His finger eased from the trigger. The rifle lowered slowly to the floor. Anna whimpered, but did not cry. Her eyes, Margaret's eyes, locked on Elijah, wide and pleading. Pike's grin was cruel. "She's worth more alive, old man, but dead'll do if you twitch wrong." Elijah's voice was low. "Let her go, boy. You don't know what line you're crossing." "Don't I?" Pike pressed the knife harder. Anna gasped, her small hands clutching at his arm. "This little prize was promised. You're standing in the way of a bargain. And men like me, we don't take kindly to thieves." Elijah took one step closer, slow as dusk. "You think you've cornered me. Truth is, you've made a mistake." Pike sneered. "And what's that?" Elijah's eyes never left Anna. "You forgot, I've got nothing left to lose." He lunged. His hand caught Pike's wrist, wrenching it back. The knife clattered to the floor as Anna tumbled free. Pike cursed, struggling, but Elijah's years of war and ranch labor bore down like iron. He drove Pike hard into the wall. The struggle was brutal, close and silent, but for fists striking wood and Pike's ragged gas. Elijah seized a brass candlestick from the nightstand and brought it down with all the strength left in him. Pike fell limp, blood pooling across the planks. Anna pressed herself against the wall, trembling, the cut on her neck thin but bleeding. Elijah turned to her, breath ragged, and touched her shoulder. "You're safe," he said, "for now." Outside, Granger's voice cut through the smoke. "McGraw, you kill one of mine, and I'll burn that cabin to the ground with you in it." Elijah lifted his rifle again, his hands steady despite the tremor in his chest. "Then you best start lighting matches," he muttered. Smoke from gunfire drifted across the yard, pale against the gray morning sky. 2 of Granger's men lay wounded, their horses circling nervously. Still, the fight pressed on, bullets chipping the porch posts, tearing through the shutters. Elijah crouched behind the overturned table, his breath steady, his shoulder burning from a graze. He was counting shots when a new sound rose over the gunfire. The thunder of hooves, many more than before. The shooting faltered. Granger's men glanced toward the horizon. From the south rode a column of mounted deputies, led by Sheriff Caleb Hart. Their rifles glinted as they fanned out, surrounding the ranch yard. "Hold your fire!" the sheriff bellowed. His voice carried the authority of a man long used to being obeyed. For the first time since it began, silence fell across the yard. Sheriff Hart reined in his horse, eyes narrowing as he took in the scene. The shattered windows, the wounded men, Elijah's cabin scarred by bullets. "What's going on here?" he demanded. Before Elijah could rise, Silas Granger rode forward, calm as a man delivering Sunday truth. He lifted the folded paper for all to see. "Sheriff, thank heaven you arrived. We came to serve a lawful guardianship order. The child inside is mine by contract. McGraw interfered, turned violent, and murdered one of my men." Hart's gaze shifted to the limp body sprawled near the cabin wall. His frown deepened. "That true, McGraw?" Elijah pushed himself upright in the doorway, rifle hanging at his side. His face was streaked with soot, his shirt torn and bloodied. His voice was hoarse but steady. "That man held a knife to a little girl's throat. I did what had to be done." Granger's smile sharpened. "Sheriff, don't be fooled. The girl's mother gave her to me by signed agreement. I'm her rightful guardian. McGraw has no claim. The law's written here in black and white." The sheriff's brow furrowed, his reins tight in his hands. "I've known you a long time, McGraw. Never knew you to be a liar. But paper like this carries weight." From behind Elijah, Anna stepped into view, pale but unshaken. Her small hand clutched the locket at her throat. Her voice was soft but clear. "He's lying." Hart studied her, then turned back to Granger. His jaw set, but he said nothing. The choice hung heavy in the air. Elijah's voice, low and steady, cut through the silence. "Sometimes the law gets twisted by men with money. But the truth is, standing right here." The standoff teetered, law and lies colliding in the bitter Wyoming wind. The yard lay hushed, every man waiting on the turn. Horses shifted, saddles creaked, but no one moved. Silas Granger sat tall in his saddle, the contract raised like a banner. "Sheriff," he said smoothly, "you see the truth plain. By law, the girl is mine. If McGraw resists, he'll hang for murder. That's the way of it." Elijah's grip tightened on the rifle. His body was weary, blood seeping through his shirt, but his voice carried steady as iron. "That girl is Margaret's blood. She's mine, by love if not by law. No paper of yours can change that." Anna stepped closer, clutching his sleeve, the locket glinting in the pale light. Her whisper trembled but carried. "Papa, don't let them take me." The single word cut through Elijah like fire. His chest burned, but his eyes sharpened with a soldier's resolve. Granger's smile faltered. "Sheriff, are you blind? This man is nothing but a bitter relic. He has no right." Elijah raised the rifle, slow and sure, until its barrel leveled at Granger's heart. His voice was calm, a final verdict. "You've got your law on paper, but I've got mine in blood, in vows, in the family you tried to destroy. And that law says you'll never touch her." Granger's hand twitched toward his pistol. The rifle cracked like thunder. Granger jerked back in the saddle, his fine coat blooming dark. He toppled from the stallion, crashing into the frozen earth. For a heartbeat, the yard was still. Then the deputies surged. Two of Granger's men dropped their guns, hands raised. The others spurred their horses, fleeing into the wide plain. Sheriff Hart swung down from his horse, boots thudding in the dirt. He looked at Elijah long and hard, then gave a single nod. "Some laws are written in ink," he said quietly, "others in blood. I'll not mistake the difference again." Elijah's legs gave way, and he sank into the chair by the door. Anna clung to him, her small arms tight around his arm. "You saved me, Papa," she whispered. Elijah's hand, rough and bloodied, came to rest gently on her hair. His breath was ragged, but his voice steady. "No, little one, you saved me." Spring came slow to the Wyoming high country. The snows thinned, the creeks swelled, and green shoots pressed through the black soil where fire had once left only ash. At the McGraw Ranch, life stirred again. The cabin still bore the scars of bullets, but smoke rose steady from its chimney. Inside, the sound of laughter now mingled with the crackle of fire. Elijah walked with a cane, his left side stiff from the wound that nearly took him. The war, the fire, and the siege had all left their mark. Yet his spirit, once bitter and broken, had been mended by the small hand that slipped easily into his own. Anna moved about the yard, helping with chores as best she could. She fed the chickens, carried water, and rode the old mule with a joy Elijah had not seen in years. At night, she sat by the hearth, humming Margaret's hymn, the silver locket glinting against her chest. Sometimes she would glance up at Elijah and whisper, "Good night, Papa." Each time it settled deeper into his heart, filling the hollow grief had carved. Sheriff Hart visited often, making certain Granger's men were scattered or jailed, the guardianship contract torn to worthless scraps. Justice had been served, but more than that, truth had been restored. The sheriff never failed to treat Elijah with quiet respect, a nod that said he remembered the difference between ink and blood. Years passed. Anna grew, strong and bright, carrying Margaret's gentleness and Elijah's fire. When her children played in the same yard, the locket was passed to them. It had become more than silver. It was a story, a legacy, a tale of how love had endured loss, how a rancher broken by fire found life again in the eyes of a starving girl. And on quiet evenings, when the cottonwoods rustled along the creek, Anna would swear she could hear Margaret's voice carried in the wind. Soft, steady, the same hymn she had once sung to a baby in her arms. Elijah would sit on the porch, cane resting by his side, watching the sun sink over the prairie. Beside him, Anna's laughter carried into the twilight. His heart, once stopped by grief, now beat strong with the truth he had nearly lost. Family could be broken, family could be found again, and love once given was never truly gone.